Hello, everyone. This is the Mexico Beach Planning and Zoning. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Thank you, Tammy. We have 3 pieces of business tonight, but first are the minutes. Has everyone on the board received the minutes and had a chance to look over them? Yes. Are there any questions of the meeting minutes for Monday, October 2, 2023? Any questions or comments? Thank you specifically, Lee, for leading that meeting.
Sure.
Appreciate it. So can I ask for a motion to accept these minutes as presented?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Thank you. We'll adopt these meeting minutes as presented and move on to the agenda for tonight. And the first piece of business is development order for Forgotten Coast Villas. Carly Hansen's going to share that with us.
Good evening. This is a development order application for the Forgotten Coast Villas. It was previously named the Villas at Mexico Beach. This is a 39-unit condominium at 932 15th Street. It includes 7 new residential multifamily structures with a total of 39 units. And in addition to parking, landscaping, and stormwater, this proposed development includes a pool clubhouse and a pool with additional parking for vehicles and golf carts. We have reviewed this application along with floodplain and engineering with the supporting documents and reviewed it against the comprehensive plan and land development code, and we recommend approval. Condo documents and FDEP permits will be submitted to the city prior to that development. I believe the applicant's here, several people. If y'all have any more specific questions or you'd like to come present something.
Good evening. Lance Watson, Southeast Consultant Engineers. I think Carly pretty well covered everything. The only thing I do want to mention is because this did come to the council before and we were asked to make some changes, mostly to do with this compensatory treatment and fill, and all that was updated and went through the engineering and floodplain administrator for review and recommendation of approval. And just a couple of things that were mentioned last time, the last submittal, so I just wanted to bring it up. The general commercial, we're general commercial zoning, so the maximum height requirement is 48 feet, and they're proposing 31.8 as opposed to 48, and that was one of the requests the last time too, was even though we were below the maximum height, we had neighbor comments trying to see what we could do to minimize or lower the height to help the neighbors out. So we went from a piling foundation to a stem wall foundation to allow that to happen. The impervious area maximum on general commercial is 90%, and this project is proposing 33.48%. And the allowable density is 18 units per acre, which would be 112 units, and there's 39 units proposed, which is less than half of the allowable density. But if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to
Lance,
answer.
what was the height again?
The height, the mean required is 31.8 feet.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we'll turn it over to public comment. Before we do, I'd just like to remind the public that we are a voluntary board. We focus on the business of planning and zoning for Mexico Beach. We make a recommendation to the city council, but this is not the final decision. It goes on to the city council. So on this development order for Forgotten Coast Villas, I'll open it to the public. I'd ask that if you have a comment, please come up to the podium, state your name and your address, and share that with us. Anyone from the public? No public comment. That's a first. All right. We'll now move to the close the public comment officially and move on to any board comments, questions.
A couple for Lance. Lance, looking at the blueprints, just a couple of questions real quick. I know when you were doing it on pilot, there was a retaining wall down the side for runoff.
Right.
And I noticed on this it has a wooden fence going down the side.
Yeah, so we lowered the grade by more than almost 4 feet. So we didn't need the retaining wall now.
Okay, it's still gonna have the stormwater runoff along the side.
So there's room and inside the setback, 5-foot setback, there should be a cross section of it. See what she has on.
Well, I noticed in here you have, like the last units that were developed, all the gutters are gonna be piped into the drainage ditch,
What's that?
all the gutters.
Yeah, all the gutters are tied into the pond. So if you look at sheet C17, it has a cross section of the site cut across the road.
Lance, I don't think I included that in the packet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it is.
I tried to cut down.
I can pass this around if you ask specifically if you will see it, and you can pass it around if you need to. You'll see when it gets closer to the two adjacent property lines, that top left detail, there are swells. So right now, there'll be better drainage afterwards than there is right now.
Thank goodness.
Certainly more than there was before the dirt was brought in and Jerry's guys dug the ditch out. But it goes down to a swell that will move any runoff to any runoff from the neighbors coming towards our property. Instead of backing up, it'll go to the ditch, into the wetlands, and we'll help facilitate getting that there. And then all of the runoff, even the current runoff that is going to neighbor properties from just grass, will be, you won't have any of that, because all of that is handled in the road with an inverted crown. And the area that's currently grass that will be roof area is all captured and piped to the stormwater pond. So there won't be any runoff from our property going to the neighbors. And this project will help improve the neighbors' runoff to get north and south.
I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I know that was a big concern on the last project.
Right, that,
Big
and also
concern, the height of it.
the culvert pipe was a concern too, so we increased the size of that.
Okay. What about a couple of metal buildings that are on each side?
So,
You have, on one side here, a metal building on a slab, and another metal building on a slab.
Oh,
Just kind of
well,
wondering what they are.
one of them's just a shed. The one on the west is just a residential shed. The one on the east is the plumbing company warehouse.
So not on the
Ancient
property.
or what? I don't remember.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, a good part of this one is like last time, you're not even building 50% of what's allowed,
Right.
which is kind of rare for a developer these days. They usually go to the maximum amount. So I think that's a good thing right there.
A couple of things. One, when this project first came, I wasn't on planning and zoning, I was a member of the public. And I'm very much in favor of property rights. If an individual or company should be able to do whatever is allowed within the regulations and our codes to do that, whatever ordinances that. I will say, I own property that abuts this, so I can still talk, right? Yeah. Okay. And since all of that dirt has been brought in, I've never had as much water on my property as I've had. I know that we lost probably 100 trees. I have 5 acres right there, maybe more than 100 trees. And I know that that had a lot to do with it. But after the hurricane and when it rained, there was water. After all that dirt's been there and it rained, there was a significantly more amount of water. I don't know if that's from it there or not. I'm not a hydrologist. I'm not.
So,
And I can say that even in the last 6 months, I've spent about $5,000 on dirt just to keep it out of my house, the water out of my house. And I can't put any more dirt there now without pushing it to either into Sea Pines, and Sea Pines doesn't want it, or across Cypress Lane into those people who back directly into it. So I'm I'm all I can do. So if what this you say here is true, I'm 1,000% in favor of that. But I want to go back to what I said to begin with. If, as long as all this is allowable, I'm 100% in favor of whatever's allowable.
All right, and just kind of to speak on the dirt, that right now, that's just kind of stockpile, there's no final grade. The ditches that we're talking about to get the water north and south to the wetlands and to the roadside ditch from the neighboring properties has not been done because it's just stockpiled roughly right now. And to be honest, the dirt should not be there. The city gave permission for them to put it there early, which is not normal. And so there hasn't been any real grading that, that resembles the final grading on the adjacent.
So by grading, do you mean that some of that dirt will be removed?
Oh, well, right now the dirt kind of just goes as a property just drops off. It's going to be slowed down and swells dug. So where the neighboring properties drain towards this property, there will be swells to direct that with the natural profile of the adjacent properties to the wetlands and to the roadside ditch.
Well, it would seem that if dirt was put there that should have never been put there, then we will, to Lee's point, get it back to at least what it should be within regulations rather than moving it around because it's there.
Right, yeah, it'll be reshaped, and there may even be, depending on where it's at compared to final proposed grades, there might have to be some dirt come off the site to
That's what I'm
go out for that. So that's very possible. We never shot grades of the dirt after it was put there, so it very well could be higher than the final proposed grade. We were working off the original survey, and we had to because of compensatory treatment. We weren't able to back up and get a new survey and use the new grades after the dirt was brought in because that would go against the floodplain rules.
So when you say you shoot grades, will it be the case that if you do that and there's too much dirt and it needs to be moved,
It'll be hauled on site.
that's noted in the development order? What I'm trying to prevent is we built this house 4 feet over the line, sorry, we just missed it.
Oh, no.
We've got time to not miss it.
So in order to get, not only for the city requires this and DEP requires an as-built survey. And the as-built survey has to match my design drawings, and I'll be the one to approve it or deny it or say, thanks for the as-built survey, but you're 2 feet too high, cut it down and get a new survey. So the city and the state requires that as-built survey to meet our proposed grading plan.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Lance, is that gonna have I assume it's gonna have a condo association or townhome association, whatever?
It
Are
will.
they gonna maintain that swell that's gonna go down through there? So it
Yes,
stays
they'll
cool
maintain
down
all
the time?
of that. The swell, the utilities, the roadway, the condo association will maintain all of that.
Okay.
One of the neighbors out there took some photos showing the water backing up and emailed it in. I don't know if they sent it to you separately, but it wasn't included on the email I received. Yeah, I only made 2 copies because there's 17 pages. But you can see some of the water backed up on the property.
And like me, I wasn't on here when this came up originally, and that was the big thing for all the people on the street, was that swell and the water, was a big issue. Oh, your pictures, Lee?
Yeah, and I'll show you some more if you want. It is what it is. I'm not.
Oh, no,
And as I said to begin with, I stood up right out there and was supportive of this project, and I still am. I'm just saying that it sucks for some of us.
Well, like you, I do support the project, but I think just like an individual homeowner, large-scale development, an individual homeowner, the city's pretty strict about, and I can speak to it because I just went through it, the grade at my lot's higher than the vacant lot next to me, but I had to spend several $100s to put wood to prevent water draining from my higher and direct it to the front of the property. So in this case, the dirt was put there. I mean, I think the developer should try to mitigate some of the neighbor's problems because this is, Lance, how long is this project, once you get permits, how long before it's completed?
All right, so I guess that's me then. So,
If you'll come up, please, and
I'm good. My name's Dave McCullough. I'm the project manager for J. Ward. So, once we actually get permitting and all, we look to break ground within about three months after getting our permits to get started. Project this size, we're gonna start with the first ones and then work our way through it, each slab. And as the slab gets going, we'll start framing the rest of all the way through it. It's probably gonna take about a year and a half. Site prep and all that will start as soon as we start on the site. When we first did it, we went back, there was a small ditch between this property and the other property. We actually dug a ditch down through there to help relieve that hot water problem that was there. And then we also, with Lance's help, they come out, we put silt fence up, moved it back over and put a double swell in before it gets to the ditch to try to make sure that none of the water coming from this property was actually going to the neighbors. The problem is the neighbor's property used to flow through this one, is part of the problem. So that's why we put the ditch in there. The ditch is on this property, it's not city property, it's not on their property, it's on this property. We put the ditch there to relieve that. Because, I mean, as what before, all of that would partially drain on this property, which caused this problem, you know what I mean? So it's not that we're pushing water to them, we're just not taking the water. So when Lance and them come up with the swells and all was to help relieve that problem, take it upon ourselves to help get the water away from that property line. Push it either to the wetland in the back, to the storage, or help put some of it back up towards the front where it should be going anyway. So,
We were the first ones built there 40 years ago. I get it. Everything's higher than we are. I understand that. I get it.
well, it sounds, I heard that you guys were responsive to the public on the height and you listened to the
Right.
neighbors, so I think that's a good start, and now you've heard the concerns with the water, so if you will be attentive to those, working with, of course, with
yeah, I know,
Lance and Southeastern.
as a representative of the owner of the property, I mean, he's got about another $200,000 just designing this to help that. I mean, it's taken Lance and them almost a whole nother year to get this all worked out. You've had your floodplain management officials involved in it to make sure it's right. And as Carly's been involved, I mean, there's thousands of emails back and forth trying to narrow this down to fit the public's eye.
Got it.
Not so much stay in the LDRs, but to fit, to make it more appeasing to the public.
We appreciate it.
Get better eventually.
Any more comments from the board? So the next thing we would need is a motion for approval of this development order. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the development order. Show that I'm a good sport.
Very good.
I'll second.
Another good sport, thank you. All right, would you call the vote?
Okay. Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Kreis?
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Elsey?
Yes.
Thank you both. And I probably should have started before we even got into anything, just mention and make sure the public knows that one of our board members resigned, Craig Jerkins, and you're going to step right in, so we really appreciate Julie Gardner. So is there anything we need to do on that, Mr. Attorney, or is that just,
No, she's fine.
got it, thank you. All
Just need to
right.
get a new alternate.
Two new ones.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is Land Development Code Language Additions, adding lodging establishments to general commercial zoning district, and we have that from Carly.
Yes, we have a land development code language addition proposed to add the term lodging establishments as a principal use in the general commercial zoning district. This was something that we came across in happenstance. All 3 lodging establishments in Mexico Beach are currently in zoning districts that don't allow for them. So in order to kind of write it on the city side, we are proposing that the term be added to the general commercial zoning district as EE lodging establishments. That also was some renumbering, but it's lettered, so re-lettering. And we proposed removing the term temporary uses as defined in section XX because there's not a temporary use section as defined by the XX. I can answer any questions you have or that the public has on that.
So that was just basically an oversight, right? I've lived here since the 70s, and all 3 of these establishments have been here since the 70s, and they've been lodging.
Right.
So it was never in the language.
So where that's important from our side is right now they're non-conforming uses, and that means that none of them can expand or add anything to the property or really do anything because they're not an allowable use in general commercial. So we're looking to right that wrong and make them all conforming uses. That way they can come and apply to things with the city without that being a barrier.
Makes perfect sense. Let's go ahead and open it up to the public for public comment on this topic. Does anyone from the public have anything on this item? No one from the public, we'll turn it over to the board. Anyone on the board?
Well, I got a problem, is the fact that those 3 places are in the commercial. If you look at the zoning map up here, that's all red is your commercial. So if you add hotel to commercial, any one of them properties that's empty right now could turn into a hotel with residential houses behind it. And this is an example, if you look up here, a dedicated beach right across the street from it. The first 3 lots over here are empty. You got a couple others over here and several back down this way. And all behind that are homes. So you could have hotels there. I'd rather see this made as an exclusion somehow, a grandfather exclusion for these 3 hotels to fit in there and leave the hotels out of commercial. Because that could have an effect on residential areas in the future.
Are there any other comments from the board, or would you like to make a motion with that exception?
I think the question to Carly would be, can we make an exception or exclusion for those 3 specifically?
I'm not really sure what that would look like. Them being non-conforming uses, they existed prior to the Land Development Code, I believe. Meaning they were allowable until they were 50% damaged by Hurricane Michael, and then they were rebuilt, and whether that should have been done, I wasn't the one who reviewed it. But that's what the issue in them being non-conforming right now is if they were damaged again, they wouldn't be allowed to be rebuilt. There might be a way that we could grandfather them in a different way that makes them allowable. I'm just not sure of that. That could be something we look into.
I think it's possible.
Well, you know, you had a lot of non-conforming properties that got wiped out after the hurricane, and they were allowed to rebuild to the normal footprint. As far as I know, like the end of 15th Street, Bellevue, they rebuilt to their old footprint. El Governor's the same way. So these were rebuilt to what they were before.
And I think there was a specific ordinance that was passed to allow them to do that.
There was, yeah, build back to your footprint. So this could, that could be in there for an exclusion for these 3. Just like everything else, they're non-conforming now. There's a whole bunch of properties that are non-conforming, but they were allowed to be built back to what they were.
Okay.
I think an easier way of doing it, instead of talking about an exclusion just for these 3 properties, would be to come up with a totally different zoning category.
That's what I was gonna say.
And have the zoning category specifically for hotel.
It's not just in general commercial.
Correct.
Well, you have it now. You have it in tourist mixed use. You have hotels. So I mean, you really have to leave it out of commercial. If you put it in there anywhere, that's going to affect all of it. It's in there right now, 2 other the zones, tourist mixed use and tourist.
Commercial?
Yeah, it's already in there for hotels.
Okay.
So what we're saying is you could change it to tourist mixed use?
No, leave it commercial just like it is, but an exclusion for them three. That way it just limits that and nothing else can be built and any of the commercial.
That's,
Have those three asked to have anything changed?
No, they've had some applications come in.
For
Where
example,
they wanted to expand and stuff like that?
accessory structures.
Yes. So if that's something the board would like us to look at, I don't have an answer for you tonight on what those options would look like, but that's something we could look into.
So something you just brought up, Chris, if they have any type of request right now, accessory structures, anything that should be allowable, it is not because of this designation, is that what we're saying?
Because they're not conforming, so they can't do anything more.
Is that why Gulfview didn't come before the board tonight?
Yes, because we were waiting to see on this issue.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So they have.
Yes.
They have asked.
They have asked, and the Driftwood has asked to rebuild their chapel.
Right.
And right now, that's not allowed.
Right.
Oh, wow.
We need to figure something out.
I agree, but I agree with what Rock said. I think we want to protect the
Yeah.
city too.
There's gotta be a way to make an exclusion for them three in there grandfathered in and just leave them three in commercial as grandfathered.
That's possible to do.
Okay.
We'll just talk about it and put something together.
Okay.
All right, so officially,
Are you gonna do?
I guess table,
yeah, we're going to table this.
table to the next meeting.
Yeah, it needs to get settled quickly though, so these people with the hotels
Right.
can do what they need to do.
Okay.
We just need a motion and a second to table.
I'll make a motion, we table that, and I don't know till when. I need to just table it.
Second.
A second?
We have a motion and a second, call for a vote.
Mr. Elsey?
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mrs. Gardner?
Yes. Excuse me, you voted to table it, or are you going to ask that it be put on, what, the next agenda meeting?
I believe that's what I already heard, but yes, that's what they said.
Thank you.
Okay, the third and final item on the agenda, the land development code language revisions and additions, accessory uses, and accessory structures. Carly again.
Right, so this is more proposed revisions and additions to the land development code. As we discussed at a previous workshop, the zoning districts are currently or allowed accessory uses based on the uses listed in each table of section 2.02.02. Based on these tables, the city is attempting to list every possible accessory structure that could be placed on a piece of property. And we are proposing we simplify that to use the definition of accessory structures, generally based on what the principal use is. These revisions propose allowing all accessory uses that are ancillary or dependent uses to the principal use of the property. So I can walk you through those proposed changes.
Yeah, if you would, please.
The first is removing the accessory uses portion of the zoning district that was previously numbered as 6 accessory uses, and then so that includes renumbering development standards there at the bottom of each zoning district. And that's for all zoning districts currently in the city. And then when we get to the language, the only definition that we are proposing to significantly change is principal structure. And that proposal is a principal structure is one that contains the primary use of a lot or parcel. That takes away some confusing verbiage from the original definition. There's a few clarifying words in other definitions, but nothing too significant. Then I'd like to talk about the standards for accessory structures. There's some language proposed here for the height of an accessory structure. I will say that we had to throw this packet together kind of quickly, so those numbers were estimates on our part. But since we put this packet together, I spoke with ETCI to get their opinion about what kind of applications were coming in for accessory structures. And they saw it a little different, and of course, since they're the building officials, I'll defer to them on this one. But I'd like to discuss this with everybody in the public, but we think it should be revised to 16 feet maximum in the zoning districts that have a 32-foot maximum. So that's half the allowable of your principal structure, and that's to allow for boats, generally. A pole barn at 12 feet, they were saying, is insufficient for even like most sheds these days are over 12 feet. So we think 16 feet's a better maximum for that, and we're proposing a max of 24 feet in all other districts with a max height of 48 feet. So that'd be your commercial property. Do you want to talk about any of that, or you want me to go through all the way? And
Why 24 feet in other lots than versus a 16? Right now, it's 16 for residential and all that for boathouses, basically.
Right.
It's already in there for 16. Where's the 24 coming from?
It's just allowing a taller accessory structure, whatever that may be, in a district that allows for 48 feet tall structures. There's really no, it allows for a 2-story building.
So the only one I know of in here that even hits that is commercial. And commercial is the 48 foot.
General
Which-
commercial and tourist mixed use, both allow for a maximum of 48.
Yeah, but to me, the commercial should be looked at for
Okay.
the max height of, the commercial I can see 48 feet, but half, as you know, 3/4 of the commercial property is residential. And the residential should be held, what everybody else is held in residential is 32 feet and not 48. That's what that should be looked at, to be
Okay.
changed to 32 feet.
Everything before you is just a proposal. We can change anything or recommend changing it to council.
And you know, the other things, I've read through everything, number 6, and all your stuff in there, and it, you know, it talks about sheds, this and that, everything else, playhouses, 100 square feet and stuff like that. If you take all that out, that's gonna be pretty much missing. So whatever
The
language
current
you put in,
development restrictions.
yeah, you need to put that in there still, the 16 feet, restrictions on other things, and make sure that your permeable surfaces, it all goes together.
Right,
Because it
there
all
is still
includes
the
it.
requirement that impervious surface calculations must be met with that accessory structure.
And like you said, in that 2.0400 accessory structures, that should be in there. You know, I don't know what somebody could come up with as an accessory structure. There's no telling, a zoo in their backyard or something. I mean, I just want to keep this covered, that all of a sudden somebody in a residential neighborhood doesn't come up with something that's just out to lunch, and there's nothing to stop it. That's what I'm kind of concerned about.
So when you remove all of these examples, how will it then be managed? When someone comes
It would
before
be
you?
managed using 2.0501, which we are proposing to add, that states accessory uses are permitted in all districts only when the accessory use is in nature, customarily incidental, and clearly subordinate to a permanent or permissible principal use or structure, and unless otherwise provided, these uses and structures are located on the same lot and parcel as the principal use. No accessory use shall be allowable without the principal use first established. Accessory uses shall not involve operations or structures not keeping with the character or district where located.
Okay, so that's something new, because it isn't in here right now. It's going to be a new paragraph. I don't have that.
It's in the
It's in there.
Oh, it's in
That's
the
what-
packet.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're proposing that.
Yeah.
There's currently not a 2.05.01, which is interesting, but, so it slipped in the numbering well.
Okay.
But basically, we're saying that if your house needs a detached garage, you don't need to have that specifically listed that you need a detached garage. It's just a use that is dependent on your home.
You know, just curious, given height restrictions for sheds and such as they currently exist, there's a lot of pole barn structures in the city for boats that are in violation of the 12-foot, because most of the ones that are put in, the eave height for these larger boats is at least 12 feet, because the center height's got to be
Right.
tall enough.
It's 16 feet right now.
It is?
Yeah, it's 16 feet. Residential, single-family residential, all that is all 16
Okay.
feet.
So we're not,
16 feet for garage and carports and boat sheds, yes.
so we're not changing that?
With the, in your text, that is different. With what I discussed with the building department, they're saying that it should be at least 16 feet for sheds, boat sheds, pole barns, garages. That's really tall enough to do something with center console.
Right.
24 feet, that gets a little higher in residential areas. The 16 feet is pretty much where it is now. You look at the houses that have 16 feet, they're pretty much the height of their houses. You go to 24 feet, it's going to be, it'll stick out, basically. In the
Well, that's not in keeping with the character of the district we're located.
Yeah, that's-
Right,
yeah,
but if we don't like
24
the
feet is-
24 feet requirement, that doesn't have to be there. It was just
Okay.
really, you're right, when general commercial is in a residential area, that proposes an issue. If it was just general commercial in commercial areas, and the structure was 48 feet, a 24-foot structure really wouldn't look that out of place. But when surrounded by residential.
Okay.
So when you remove the language of no opaque fencing and some of the things that are now struck through here, and it's not in keeping with the character of the district we're located, who enforces that, or who establishes what that can or can't be?
With regard to the portions of the accessory use structure that say restricted, that propose a like development restriction to a certain type of use, we could add that specifically if you'd like. In for specifically the areas and sheds for outside storage. So does that mean that a shed should have a fence around it specifically, just because it's a shed that holds things? We didn't think that was really serving a purpose. Now, if there was, I don't know.
Well, your shed with the fence around, that's in there by commercial property affecting residential. Then it has to have a fence around it. That's already in there. In different, if you look at the different
For buffering,
categories.
yes.
Yeah, different categories. So
Right.
that's already there, not in residential.
Right.
But what I'm saying, just like you said, that who's going to determine all this? That's the thing, it's like,
Well, like
your
you
opinion
said,
and my
a
opinion are two
zoo-
different things.
A zoo in a residential neighborhood really is not keeping up with the character.
I mean, we just went through this a couple of months ago with, I'm trying to think what it is. When you changed, one commercial property that was, an outboard motor store, and now it wanted to become a bar. That was a like business. Well, me, outboard motor store and a bar isn't a like business. It depends who's looking at it.
Right.
You remember all that?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I'm saying, you take all this out of here, there still has to be something in there with the heights, the sheds, the opaque fence and everything else. Otherwise, it's just gonna be too out in the open. Everybody's gonna figure out that, well, no, your opinion doesn't matter, this is what I say, and we've been through that before.
Well, to get to the crux of it is the question, who determines what's in
That's
the
it.
character of the neighborhood?
And who would that be now? The way this is written, who's the trying? I mean,
It,
know, it's good
it
to
would
see
depend
that.
on the application. If it was a residential application, the building department would look at it, and if it was commercial, then planning would. So with regard to height, I think we've touched on not liking the 24 feet. So we can, once we hear from the public, of course, consider making that a recommendation to change it to 16 feet. So then that takes that out of the line. Going into the restrictions that are currently listed for accessory uses, the first one we come across is for playhouses. Do we feel the need to restrict a playhouse to 100 square feet?
That's-
Hundreds of
That's
10 by 10.
10 by 10, I would
That
think
seems
so.
pretty trivial
Yeah,
to me.
that-
Right.
Yeah.
So no or yes?
I would
don't know what
say
that-
no, but I think I heard no.
Okay. And then we have areas and sheds for outside storage shall be enclosed by an opaque fence of at least 6 feet in height. Do we,
That was for properties abutting residential neighborhoods, commercial property abutting residential neighborhoods.
so that's a separate section of the code under buffering and landscaping.
Yeah. Mhm.
This is under accessory uses, but it doesn't, as it's written out, areas and sheds aren't allowable, but then it restricts them, so it doesn't make a whole bunch of sense. But do we feel the need to put additional requirements on areas and sheds for outside storage?
Not for residential.
Okay.
Only
And then
for-
we
Only
have-
for commercial and the rest of it, but not for residential. And I don't think it's residential right now. Nobody in a residential neighborhood that has a shed has a fence around it.
Right,
They're in your backyard, it doesn't matter if your yard's fenced or not.
right. That's our understanding as well. And then we have no accessory buildings used for industrial storage of hazardous, noxious materials shall be located nearer than 100 feet from any property line. I'm not really sure what other regulations that has to meet, but it feels like there's got to be something if you're storing hazardous materials. But that could mean pesticides, I guess. I don't know how to regulate that.
Well, that could be in there for somebody who has a business out of their house who's storing a bunch of chemicals in a shed outside in
Right.
a residential neighborhood. That's why that's in
Right.
there.
Or it could even be a new development where a contractor has a storage facility that has flammable liquids or anything else that needs to be protected or secured.
So, all the uses that are currently listed in the table right now would still be allowable. They're just not explicitly listed. Pole barns, tool sheds, garages, greenhouses, storage. It's just saying that because that's not listed in the table specifically for that zoning district, if you have determined that you want a greenhouse on your property, you can have a greenhouse.
So to be clear, as it sits now, this is proposing that column 6 would be removed and replaced by that language.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Well, not in the table specifically, but if a property owner were wanting to add an accessory use, they'd go to 2.0501, which allows accessory uses in all zoning districts. And if the applicant can say, hey, we have this as our principal use, we want to do X out on our property, okay, we'll consider that.
Understood. Any other, you have another question, Carly?
Will that also reference 2.04, which is accessory structures right now in the LDC, where it has in there, like you already read, the primary use of a lot in zoning and accessory structures, incidental and subordinate of a regular house? Should that, the 2.04 should also follow the 2.05.
They work together, and the definitions that are in 2.04 and are revised in that proposed language were also added to 2.05, just to make sure the definitions were there and people knew the difference between accessory use and a principal use, or a structure, accessory structure and a principal structure.
Okay.
You have any questions, Carly?
Now,
All right, let's open this to the public. Please come forward.
Lisa Logan, Maryland Boulevard. So from this immediate discussion, what have you determined about the height in residential?
16 feet.
Okay, I vehemently oppose 16-foot accessory structures in residential. And did you determine that you wanted to take residential general and put it in that, as was proposed? Is that still what you're talking about? Because the proposal was to only eliminate residential low density from this and put this height restriction in all the other zoning categories, which takes in residential general. That's a problem.
For the accessory structures, It should be the same as residential. Right now, it's 16 foot in residential. My barn over my RV is 16 feet. My
No.
neighbor's is 16. They're all 16 feet, and they're not big boats, a 24-foot boat.
Garages and boat covers are 16 feet.
Mhm.
Sheds
12
are
feet.
at 12 feet. And I can tell you, from somebody who's living in residential general, I do not want to look at 16-foot sheds popping over my house. It's bad enough to look at 16-foot boat sheds because for the most part in my area, the houses, the majority of them are single family and we're 16 to 20 feet tall, and I see absolutely no reason to raise the height of accessory structures like sheds. If EPCI says more people are wanting bigger sheds, well, that's too bad, because you do not get to put things that tower over houses in your backyards. And if you put 16 feet in all the other zoning categories, y'all are creating a monster here. And as a resident, I don't like this at all. There's no reason to raise the height of a 12-foot shed. So this is a major problem for me.
Can I speak to Ms. Logan? Mr. Chair? So as someone who's experienced FEMA flood regulations, and someone who recently built in an AE flood zone, and you're required to build your first floor at a certain height above grade, which we went, I think, a foot above that FEMA number. But when I came to the city and applied for a permit for my shed, I was given two options. The first option, which would have, by all current legalities, been fine, they said I could put the shed with the first floor of the shed at the same height as my home, or I could put flood vents in my shed, which I didn't like either option because the flood vents cost $600, but I put the flood vents in. But it would have been perfectly acceptable under the code per EPCI to put my shed 4 feet in the air, just like the first floor of my house, which effectively the roof of my shed would have been well over 16 feet at that point. So I understand what you're saying, but I just,
Over 16 feet
From
from
the
the ground
grade.
beside it. not
Right.
Yeah.
The new 4-foot elevated
right,
foundation.
right. But it would have been way up in the air. And I'd had to have a huge staircase to go up to it, so.
Well, I want y'all to think about preserving the character which you brought up a number of times already. Popping these things up in the air above the houses does not preserve any character of Mexico Beach. And I also am concerned that you make very sure that you take the residential general and treat it exactly the same as you treat the rest of the residential, which, as the wording is in this proposed language, residential general would have had much higher standards. So you treat the residential general as residential, and watch all this. Y'all are getting into serious trouble. I believe that the wording on this whole thing is much more confusing. I do not understand why this has suddenly become an issue. I'd like to know who brought up things like the height restrictions. It hasn't been discussed in the city council, so why are we getting into this? And why are we fiddling with the LDR at this point in time when we are supposed to be working very soon on a master development plan, which will then require that we go through the LDR and make it from beginning to end match the master development plan. Cherry picking these things right now out of the LDR and changing all this is not going to be helpful when we have to go through it and fix it all again. So the cart is before the horses are out of the barn, and this whole thing is a mess. y'all need to take a big breath and step back and find out what's driving this. These changes, these cherry pick changes in the LDR. What's driving all of this?
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to present anything on this? Come.
Rusty Wright, Fortner Avenue. Just want to clarify the 24 foot, is that gone? You know,
24 feet for what?
can you build a 24 foot pole barn? You're saying 16,
It's always been 16.
but the changes that I've read, wants to increase it to 24 feet. So if we staying at 16, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, a 24 foot pole barn, good Lord.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. That's,
Yeah. So the 24 foot number that's floating around town today, about these changes, that number's gonna be changed back to 16 foot, or is it just gonna stay?
Nothing has to be changed back yet. There's been no change.
So it's not gonna go to 24 feet?
Well, this is a discussion about that.
Right, yeah.
And it was just in those two areas where it was 48 feet is the
Right.
maximum height restricted.
20, I mean, a 24 foot pole barn is hideous. And we don't want that, you don't want that. And I mean, we have some nicer older homes, like mine. I've got a home built in 58. I don't want a 24 foot pole barn or any type of structure on my street. It's just, I disagree with it. So if y'all aren't gonna change it, that's great. That's fantastic.
The 24 foot thing, correct me if I'm wrong, was only in the two districts or in the zoning districts that you could have 48 feet, right?
Not as what's in the packet that was posted on the website.
I read
That wasn't-
general residential.
Yeah, that wasn't, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? All right, let's turn it over to board comments.
So why did this come up? That's my, Lisa brought that up and wants to, so do we know why this?
Accessory structures were brought up before in regards to food trucks and food trailers. That's the only time it's ever been brought up, and that was in regards to Killer Seafood, the fact that another food truck wanted to do something like that. Now, whenever it was discussed at the city council, Carly didn't really get good guidance on what to look at in regards to the accessory structure, so she took what was discussed that night and did the best that she could with that information, and we ended up here tonight.
So how high is the pole barn that Killer has? I mean, and they're in a commercial zone anyway.
Why do you ask that question? Are you,
Well, just visually trying to.
oh, okay.
I kind of know what 16 looks like, and I don't think that's 24, but
I
it
can
might.
get that answer for you.
But it's in commercial, so it wouldn't apply to Miss Logan, where, which I agree, all residential, not just low density, but all residential should be the 16 foot.
Well, to your point, if Killer Seafood is 16 feet and that's sufficient, then why anymore?
Yeah, why anymore?
Yeah.
No, it's in there right now. I mean, it says black and white, 12 feet maximum height in residential zoning districts, 12 feet in commercial zoning districts, and 16 feet for garages, carports, and boat sheds. Lisa mentioned the carports. I mean, I got a garage next to me that's 16 feet. That's how it's been. It's been in here forever. I don't see a reason to change what's in here. And in commercial, it shouldn't be any higher than 16 feet that's in there now. That should just stay. So like I said, I don't see a change, why to change all this? That's,
Well, is part of it that you're saying now, a boat storage shed is 16,
16.
but a storage shed is 12.
It's in, right here, it says garages, carports, and a garage could be separate. A garage could be your workshop in the backyard. If you put a garage door on it that you can fit a car in, it can be 16 feet high. That's the only difference between a workshop and a garage. It has a door for a car. A workshop has a door like that. You get in and out. You can't drive a car in. That's the definition
Because
of a
what I'm trying to
garage.
understand is what's the real difference between a boat shed and a storage shed?
A storage shed is like a small building where you keep your garden tools and your lawnmower.
But there's some pretty good sized storage sheds too. If you
Right.
want a loft area up top,
Or
What's the difference in keeping with the landscape, if you will, to look at a boat shed at 16 feet or a storage shed at 16 feet as you look down the street? What's the difference in those two?
Or if you wanted to close in your pole barn to make it more of a storage shed, but it's still 16 feet, what would happen then? You wouldn't be able to close it in, because then it would take it from a boat shed to a storage shed. I don't know.
Half of them in Mexico Beach already are half enclosed in. Just about everybody's pole barn in the back, half of them is closed in, and it's storage. That's how it is.
That one
And most of
makes
them are
sense to
16
me,
feet.
that there's an odd distinction between the two of a storage shed and a boat storage shed.
So in
What
order
about
to
a
take
tractor
away
storage
that
shed?
distinction, or if we desire to, should accessory structures just be limited to 16 feet flat? It doesn't matter if you're residential, commercial, if you're a boat or tools.
It sounds like it to me.
Keep it simple.
Okay.
You said the Driftwood has proposed to put the chapel back. Do we know what the height would be? I can't remember. I know the steeple on the Driftwood was, I can't remember what it used to be, but I know it was, do we know what that would look like?
It didn't have a height on the preliminary plans that were submitted. It was assumed that it was over 12 feet. It had to meet some floodplain requirements because of its location. And then you have the steeple.
Yeah, it had the measurements on everything except the height.
And so if this was accepted as discussed, that would be 16? Is that what we're?
Yes. That application, along with any application, could apply for a variance, and they'd come before you with a separate application to ask for additional height if it was needed.
Which would be hard to get.
Yes.
With what we just passed, right?
Anything else from the board? So where do we find ourselves on this piece of business? For the 16, 24, and as it currently stands?
What I have is the board recommending this language with the recommendation that we change that section to limit all accessory structures at a max height of 16 feet. And that's the only recommendation I have.
Is there anything else from anyone else on that?
Just a question. And I already know the answer, and you already said it, but I'm saying it again to Julie's point. An existing business wanting to build back something that was there is probably going to be higher than 16 feet. Yes, you said they can come for a variance. With the variance language that we recently passed, it's virtually impossible to get a variance with that. So that would say, no, they cannot do that above 16 feet. Am I understanding that correctly?
And I don't know very many people in town that would not like to see the chapel rebuilt, personally.
If they're building back to where they were
What they
in the
did
original
before.
footprint,
I don't know whether that ordinance expired.
Well, that's what I think, there was an ordinance, and I don't know which one, that allowed those rebuilds to happen. But at some point it expired.
I
It's
think
not
it
there anymore.
expired.
And
So-
then it
It
expired
October the 24th.
Yeah.
That was to streamline the commercial process. I don't know what ordinance did that. And then we have the limited setback waiver if a building was in the wrong footprint or the lot was too small. On every residential property, you can rebuild one residential unit. That's in there. I don't know what fixes the chapel.
couldn't that be extended, the ordinance that was there? I mean, we extended ordinances for mobile homes
It
year
could
after
be.
year after year.
It could be.
Even though it's already expired.
Yeah.
So that would cover the chapel and things like that,
Put it
because
back.
that's your footprint.
I think it was the reason why there was an expiration date put on it was just to spur people
Yeah.
to get it done.
Yeah.
Not let it sit there for the next 15 years. And they figured after 5 years, that was long enough.
But back to what I said, if we do it at 16 feet currently, that's a no to them unless other actions, is that correct?
Unless we can take a look at that. For them in particular,
But we're saying no to them, do we know that they have something submitted that
I don't
exceeds
know,
16?
I don't know.
On their plan that they submitted, they have a person, drawn on the plan, which would give you the impression that it's taller than 16 feet, just based on the size of the person's body compared to the building. But what they're proposing to build back is the identical chapel that they had before. They're using the exact same building plans and everything.
I don't think it exceeded 16 feet before. I'm
With the.
not a
with the-
builder, but
With the,
People.
whatever's on
With
the
the
top,
staple.
whatever thing on the top. I don't know what
I
it's,
got you.
I don't know what it's called.
Staple.
So I think it's
to me,
church.
there's
I
a
don't know
way
if
to
that's what it is.
do an exception for this one thing.
if there can be an extension to
And
that, to build back what was there.
And that would cover Gulf Shores, Gulf Breeze at the end of 15th Street too, with what they want to do with the swing thing, because that would be built back of where they were before.
Well, I mean, if it's built back where it was before and everything was identical. And I wasn't here whenever it was here before, I don't believe, so I'm not sure, what was there that was taken out by the hurricane.
Would that mean that if El Governor Campground wanted to build a new pole barn structure to cover picnic tables or other amenities, 16 feet?
16 feet is that, yeah.
That's correct.
And they have one there now, don't they? Do we
And
know?
it's
when-
not 16 feet.
No.
I bet it's 12 maybe, to the top
At
of
the
the
top
gate.
of the
Really?
eaves, maybe. I would like to find out if we can extend that, that ordinance, if that's possible.
That is absolutely possible. If the board votes, more than 3 of them decide to do that, it can be done.
More than 3. Is that
Or
4?
3.
Okay.
If 3 of them decide that that's what they want to do, it can be done.
Okay. All right, so
Do we
we're,
want that part of this recommendation?
Yes.
yes.
Can we figure out what ordinance that
I've got it written down on my board.
was? Okay.
I'll have to.
But it's the one that allowed for, it expired in October. Okay.
Something off the top of my
So
head.
Might have that one.
just for fun, Chris, is the Gulf View, what they're doing, is that higher than 16 feet?
No.
No, I don't believe so, no.
All right, so to wrap this one up, is this one in the same boat as the last that you're going to
It's up to y'all.
reword this and bring it back?
So what we could do is we could go forward with recommendations, and this could go before council on December 12th, is that 12th? The next council meeting. I could make the changes that you recommend, or we could table it and bring it back in January.
Would anyone on the board like to make a motion incorporating the changes that we've discussed so that it goes to the city council? If not, we table it.
Can we make a separate motion just to bring the ordinance that expired to the city council, to extend it, and leave this until January?
That would be just to table it then, right?
He tables this.
Yeah.
Table this and make a motion to bring the expired ordinance up. That would take care of the 3 things that are going on right now.
I mean, you could just ask Kristen to do that. I mean, you could follow that if you wanted to.
But with doing that, so if you decide to table, I want to make sure that we know what we're supposed to be doing in the downtime. So I have the change that adjusts the standards to restrict all accessory uses to 16 feet. I haven't heard any other proposed changes. Which that's fine if we want to table it regardless. I just want to make sure that we know what we're supposed to be doing in the meantime.
So we're saying all accessory structures be 16, not just keep storage at 12.
That's correct.
My fear with that is we're gonna get into some things that are already in town, that those structures are used for people staying in them. Except that they're becoming a,
Accessory dwelling unit?
Yes.
Or like a
yes,
single
That's
flat?
yeah,
prohibited anyway.
I
yeah,
don't think the
but
city allows that.
No.
allowed and happening is true.
Well, then you gotta enforce the rules.
I understand,
Yes.
I understand, but I'm afraid we might get into something, but that's just
I
my,
think that would be separate than this
Yeah.
16-foot maximum height and lumping all accessory structures under it.
I'm for tabling it, that's me.
Okay, well, if there's no motion, then that's,
But, I mean, I think we do the language that we've talked about, changing,
We'll make that motion.
how do I need to say it, Carly?
What do you want to do?
Table it for this moment and have Carly work on putting in
On
the recommendations.
that language.
I make a motion to table it until the January meeting and work on the language that we've talked about.
Okay, and that language is to limit all accessory structures to 16 feet?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, okay.
I second that.
All right, Ms. Tam.
Okay. Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Crease?
Yes.
Mr. Elsey?
Yes.
And to the point of that you're considering a second motion, that's just, now,
Recommendation.
Just, I
Recommendation,
just need to
Chris.
say to Chris, I think this should go on the agenda for the next
agree.
city council meeting. I don't think you need a vote.
okay.
We'll take
All
care of
right,
it.
you got that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There being no other business, you have something?
Well, yeah, the information I passed out tonight, what you see there is a satellite photo of all the remaining St. Joe parcels of property to the north of Mexico Beach. There's 7 parcels totaling almost 1,241 acres of land. One of the things that I've started working on several weeks ago is contacting the Bay County Planning Department, Tyndall Air Force Base's community planner, and the St. Joe Company. Because as Mexico Beach expands, our only way of expanding is to the north. And with the master plan that we're working on, and the fact that we need to update the land development regulations, this is a perfect time to try to determine how the city wants to expand, how we want to grow, the type of businesses that we want to be here. My personal opinion is our LDR is severely lacking in zoning categories. It lacks in development orders, and it needs, and there are the different types of development orders. And so there's many things that we need to work on. And so I'll pass this out tonight because I want the Planning and Zoning Board to begin thinking about, the future growth and development of the city as we move forward, either with the master plan or with getting a consultant to help us update the land development regulations. This is going to be something that we all need to talk about and just determine, the growth of the city, not just now in the next, near 10, 15 years, but 50 and 100 years from now, what we discuss will be in play.
Chris, if you drew a line from B to E, that triangle in between, is that what's been referred to in the past as the Corey property?
No, the Corey property is the triangle of property where the canal. You see?
Got it.
Yeah.
You showed me, thank you.
Yeah, that property is already inside the city limits. That's where the Sweetwater development is proposed.
Okay, I think I was looking at that white line as the divider. C is all of that square.
Everything to the north of these St. Joe parcels has been sold to Deseret Ranch.
Not a whole lot left.
No, sir. That's why it's important when we start working now to figure out how we want to grow into the future.
How much of it, is all of this not in the city as it currently exists, or some of it is? some
None of it is. None of those parcels.
None of these are.
Yeah. A through G, none of those parcels are inside the city limits.
I'm just looking at your, sorry.
Well, it's a-
was that one right there?
The little square,
Yeah.
that's owned by the city,
Okay, where,
Is that where the new?
the new public works.
okay,
Okay,
okay.
that's-
okay.
that's the
Okay, there's
25
there's
acres.
your,
So
yeah,
what
right there.
power, does
Right
the
there.
city have the power to annex? How far?
Yeah, that's
I mean,
the city right now.
what's this
Yeah.
road over here?
Well, there's multiple, just, you know, dirt trails and roads that go
Right.
through there. I mean, ultimately, what it, you know, if it was my decision, we would incorporate, you know, some additional zoning categories to where we could increase density, we could increase the height allowable for buildings. Because as you're aware, one of the things that I recommended to the Charter Review Committee was to implement into the charter the old, what I call the old portion of Mexico Beach, the current city limits of Mexico Beach. Implement the height restrictions on that part of the city, because everybody agrees that we want to protect the Mexico Beach the way it is, the way it has been, the character of Mexico Beach. But then the new zoning categories that we could adopt in the LDR would allow for increased density. It would allow for increased height on buildings. And that way it would give the city some different opportunities as far as growing, you know, having apartment complexes, having hotels, having, you know, more commercial areas, more restaurants, you know, the things that we hear that the citizens want, that it's just not possible right now with the layout of the city and the restrictions on the land and how little land we have inside of our city limits. And it gives flexibility to the St. Joe Company as well as any other developers who want to purchase that property to, you know, help us develop and grow as a lot of cities along the coast have.
You said St. Joe Company purchasing it, are they the ones that have it?
Well, St. Joe has it, but I mean, they may determine to sell that off at some point.
Okay.
You know, like with the apartments, they own, what they have now, they own that property, but then they've sold it off to the, what is it, Home?
Yeah, whole name.
No, it's Home. D.R. Horton is the townhome development, but the apartments, I can't remember. First, it starts with Home and then Home Space or something like that, but they're the builders and owners of the apartment complex.
Well, I can tell you, Chris, since I've been here, all the meetings I've been to, all the citizens of Mexico Beach, they don't want anything with density. They want to see the shopping center come in, grocery store and stuff like that, being added back in here, not more residential hotels and high rises and everything else. They want commercial property back here, kind of like our zoning for commercial now without residential.
The problem is you're not going to get commercial until you get more residential here. The commercial's not going to come until there's enough population here to support those commercial businesses.
But I think I'm glad to see we're looking to the future, and I think we could go into these areas right here and designate some designated commercial area that it's not
Residential,
sprinkled
commercial.
in right on top of the residential. I think you could have a designated area that is just commercial, rather than it being right in your backyard or my backyard, and we don't want it.
And one of the things,
Yeah.
whenever, you know, discussing with the St. Joe Company, the Knox to Bay, or not Knox, but the Gulf to Bay Parkway, you know, is still on the drawing board. And that would be sort of a back beach road type situation for Mexico Beach. And they foresee, you know, that would be where a lot of the commercial would go into. So immediately behind Mexico Beach on here, they would foresee residential, and then the back beach road type.
Where on this is the proposed back beach or Gulf
How much
Park?
further back?
Yeah.
It's way back.
Well, if you see where Bubba and Barbara Harmon's property is, they've already sold an easement through their property, you know, for planning on that. And then with St. Joe owning this,
That easement's gonna be
yeah,
pretty
that
easy.
easement there, and then they own this easement here. And so, right now, theoretically, that's where they would see that go, is pretty far to the north of us.
So how far could,
How many miles north of us as we sit right now, if you could give an estimate?
Oh, Lord, I don't know. I can measure it out and email everyone. I'll measure it out on Bay
The
County.
parcel that Bubba Harmon sold for this Gulf to Bay Back Beach Road begins off of 386, quarter mile from Bubba's house. It goes up at a diagonal. and
Yeah, I'm
according-
just looking at the
Where
diagram.
that tower
According
is.
to Bridget Precise, who told me that the road would come across, and it would come across the north corner the north boundary of the big St. Joe development, and it has to hook back in before Tyndall Air Force Base. So we're not talking but a mile, mile and a half
From here.
from here.
And then I think further out, where it's gonna connect is on the north side of the intercoastal, like at Overstreet, right?
Are you talking about
The,
what goes around East Bay?
yeah,
Yeah.
because that bridge is already there, they wouldn't have to build another bridge right now.
Well, what's going around East Bay, the drawings that I've seen online, it shows it coming down straight for, like where the Sweetwater is, the Sweetwater development. But again, I can send you some
Okay.
maps showing that later.
Please, if you would.
Yeah.
Sounds like
It
everyone
doesn't
wants to see
go,
that.
I mean, you know where that, Southern Living Home is?
Right.
Way out there? I mean, it doesn't go much past that road that goes out there, isn't that right, Chris?
The road that I'm talking, not, the road that I'm talking about comes around from Callaway,
Yeah.
231 Callaway, and around East Bay, and then comes down straight towards Mexico Beach.
Right, but I'm talking about this road that is the
back
proposed road, the back road. It'll go, I mean, the road that, where the Southern Living House, is just this side of that, isn't it?
I don't know.
Where it's gonna come out back onto 98.
I agree with Lisa. Everything that I've seen before shows it coming back into 98 before it ever gets to Tyndall Air Force Base.
Yes, yeah, that Southern Living House is just right out there.
That's
I don't know
the
if you-
back beach road,
Yeah,
we'll call it.
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
But it's right on the intercoastal.
But the road to get to it is just
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You better have a Jeep to get to it.
You gotta have four-wheel drive, yes.
So Chris, is this just for our information at this point?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that the board has? Is that it?
Sure, if we go back and look at the commercial zoning district and change that residential that's back there to 32 feet versus 48. In commercial zoning right now, commercial residential, they have the residential height is 48 feet. The way to get that, to look at, to go from future to 32 feet,
Yeah.
comply with everything else.
I mean, whenever we go to update the land development regulations, yeah, everything's on the table at that point.
All right, well, I guess with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.